So now our topic will be the foundation stone meditation and the School for Spiritual Science. I think we are all aware that Dr. Steiner brought this meditation to the Christmas conference, and it was the verse which in a way enabled the foundation stone of the new society. The discussion if the meditation is the foundation stone or not is a difficult one, because a spiritual foundation stone for a new society and for this coming world is maybe not a verse and not a meditation. So Sergei Prokofiev had the opinion that the meditation itself is more or less the envelope of a content, of a spiritual content, or even a stone, an esoteric grail stone for a future building, but not in an outer shape, but a social building, a society for the becoming world, a spiritual community, in fact. But however we discuss this kind of relationship in between what we have as a meditation and the act itself, on the 25th of December 23, the foundation stone laying was kind of a ritual. And Dr. Steiner, he himself closed the door and locked the door and had the key in his own pocket. And those who came late, they really came too late. They heard it from outside. And then he started to knock on the lectern. So everybody had the feeling now a process, a ritual process, a spiritual event or an act happened. And it culminated in these verses, but it was something going on really. And most of you remember the foundation stone laying of the first building on the 20th of September 1913. How surprising it was that Dr. Steiner started more or less with evil. Afterwards, he directly came to your city, to Christiania, Oslo, and gave the lectures about the fifth gospel. And in Dornach, in the foundation stone laying of this building, he started with the macrocosmic Lord's Prayer, evil held sway. In a way, he brought this high school, or the impulse of the School for Spiritual Science, which we talked a little bit in the late morning today, in a world near the abyss. And in a way, the first foundation stone in the earth in 1913 was absolutely reflecting, mirroring partly this situation. And some of you will also remember the address he gave to that opportunity, saying, there are cries, there are shoutings of suffering and pain. It's a little bit as a painting of Edvard Munch. So a world shocked. And especially Dr. Steiner was talking about unborn souls coming to this earth. And if they don't find another atmosphere than today, it will be very hard to incarnate properly. So we have to change, more or less, he said, we have to change the spiritual atmosphere of the world for those ready to come. Yesterday night, we talked a little bit about Ephesus and the consciousness about the unborn souls coming. And the one thing is what they prepare in the lunar sphere as a biographical incarnation constitution. The other thing is what is waiting for them on earth. And if you incarnate in 1913 following years, you will find a very difficult world. during this address in 1913, Steiner gave some little hints about the pale faces of those children just born. And in 1919, before the opening of the Waldorf School in Stuttgart, he said that he, since 7 years, that he remarked a change in the signature of the newborns. Then more and more these children come with a certain attitude of fear, shyness, and a different aura or a different expression in the faces. He did not say in 1919 they are coming in years of war, coming or then happening war, but he said more or less in 1919 that it had to do with their way to Earth, because they met other souls who just departed and more or less totally disappointed. There were so many illusions that from the 19th century on that we are now facing total welfare, overcoming all diseases, natural science will manage it all. We are the masters of the nature. These were the promises. Today we would say the utopias, even if they are still going on, the illusions of man mastering nature. Technology, we are the gods. So this is really also a quotation of, I think it was Watson and not Crick. I mean Watson and Crick, those inventors of the double helix. I think it was Watson who said, who should play God if not we, if not us? So man as God, but then at the beginning of the 20th century, it became clearer and clearer it will be a horrifying time coming. So yes, wonderful industry, but for destruction partly. The First World War was the first step in an industrial war handling, and we'll come to the foundation stone, but this first foundation stone in 1913 was in full awareness of the necessity of such a school for spiritual science in a time where the mystery of evil is one of the most striking one. Now, if we see the foundation stone meditation, there is almost nothing in it, we can say, from this darker side. And maybe this is also a little bit astonishing. Astonishing after the year 1923, which was a year full of crisis in the anthroposophical movement, but also in the world situation. And if we consider Steiner's lectures in 1923, they are full of tensions. But then this Christmas conference came. And there from the beginning, it was all positive. It is in a way that Steiner is almost in an extreme way focusing on the good. We have a lot of these paintings about Michael, and he's not focusing on the dragon. So the dragon is down, and he's facing beyond it, aware of the dragon, but not focused on the dragon. In the curative education course Steiner gave then in 1924, I think only by a single remark, it is clear that he is absolutely knowing about the dangerous development in society, also in the direction of euthanasia. And it was a discussion in the 20s. Do we want to have such people with these handicaps or not? And can we afford economically? So there were the first publications. But Steiner focused on what we can do to help. So not on the danger, but he knew about it. It is quite in the background. And in the Christmas conference, if you read all the lectures, there is not a lot about abyss. So the first morning then of the new year, then quite suddenly he said, if you look out in the world today, there's an extraordinary amount of destructive material. In German it is Zerstörungsstoff. And it's the only time in Steiner's life, as I can see, that he used this word, Zerstörungsstoff. And it has been for years. Forces are at work that foreshadow the abysses into which Western civilization is heading. So he was, most of you know, clear, but he saw it. The Christmas conference, this is really warmth and light, but in the full awareness of the opposite, which in itself was not a main topic of the conference. It was really a decision by him to focus on the good. And now I will a little bit talk about this foundation stone meditation, but it will in the awareness of what is else there. And Steiner, he had it in mind. But when we talked today in the morning about the anthroposophical society, they had a tendency to avoid evil. In a way, they were afraid also about the topic of evil at this time. And some of the old members said, we never understood when Steiner brought such images of the coming abyss. Margarita Woloshina as an example, and she was brilliant, also intellectually, she said we couldn't understand him because we had the feeling it's getting better and better, the world development. And he brought this apocalyptic element sometimes, and in fact they did not like to hear so much. They want to hear about the Christ impulse or, yeah. But Steiner had to witness also the opposite. And sometimes he was very strong in underlining these things. So in the last year of the First World War, he said once, in these present catastrophic times, we are experiencing it in the most terrible way, as it has never happened before within the history of human development, which can be traced with documents that humanity sees itself placed in a dead end, a real dead end. For Steiner, it was open what will happen in the future. And in one of his last lectures in the apocalyptic course for the priests of the Christian community, he really said in 33 there will come a situation which could be the end of world's development on earth. So the beasts from the abyss are coming. And also in a class lesson he said, no one can say now, he said it in 24, what will be in 100 years. So it was open. We now know from the historical research that it was such a century of an unbelievable murdering. More than 200 million people died, were killed in the 20th century. And the historians, they really, at the end of the 20th century, Eric Hobsbawm, as an example, he stated, no one believed at the beginning of the 20th century in this feeling of progress and humanity, that what was growing, what was the brutality and the inhumanity. There is a tendency for choosing death. Also thinking is choosing death. And to the last time, coming a little back to the situation in 1913, he also said, Dr. Steiner, the children were so pale or so afraid because this individuality is coming. They knew that there is an option in the 20th century, an option that there is a new connection between human intelligence and the forces of evil. A joint junction, a kind of, they mix together, intelligence with evil. We saw it in the history of the 20th century, let's say, in the development of mass destruction, arms or other tools, Zerstörungsstoff, in an enormous way. But we see now also with the artificial intelligence used in handling wars. So for Steiner, the esoteric schooling path, as I mentioned today in the morning of the first class, is really also facing this situation that the thinking quality of the human being is losing itself or commits itself to death instead of life. Our living thinking from the unborn world is transformed into death thinking, and that the feeling forces are also transformed or disformed in coldness and in other forms of non-expressing anymore the sun quality, and the self in the will may be also linked to a kind of a destructive potential. So in a way, he faced the situation that the darkness of the 20th century will extinguish humanity or individual human souls. Nobody, or not nobody, but the society is still not talking enough about the suicide rates, numbers, also in the Corona time, but also before and after. So many individuals is extinguished more or less by the darkness of earth. And what we see, what was an enormous impulse of Dr. Steiner, is to reawaken the self forces. In a way, instead of that they are becoming weaker and weaker, and if a quality is becoming weaker, then it's getting a ground where other forces can take place. We see in the foundation stone meditation clearly a huge call to human being, to the human soul, to wake up and also to focus on its intended true being. Also a new anchoring of the self forces in a metaphysical dimension. Instead of the loss of the self and the loss of memory and identity, which we see also in our societies, there is a loss of identity, also historical identity, memory, to know about the development and to talk about where we are now. A lot of things tend to be forgotten because the next crisis is coming, or we don't want to hear any more about evil of the past. But then it's getting instrumentalized. In the foundation stone meditation, we have a strong call for a new understanding of what is a human being in its relationship to the surrounding, to the creation in general, and to the spiritual world. A kind of a call, I said, which is really centered in the middle of the School for Spiritual Science. And in all these faculties, in all these disciplines, in all these so-called sections, central is the image of man. Also in agriculture, what is a human being? What is nutrition? What is the connection to the living earth? And this is a school which has the task to promote life instead of death. Really promoting creative life, colors on earthly ground. It is one of the starting elements of the esoteric school, that there is an element of that we have to foster and support life, spiritual life, but also organic life, by this initiative of rebuilding. I once published a book about a Jewish anthroposophist, Maria Darmstädter was her name. She died in Auschwitz-Birkenau, was in the same transport to Auschwitz as Henrietta Ginda Fritkin, a Ukrainian Jewish anthroposophical doctor who, together with Dr. Steiner, did the so-called Samariter course at the Goethe-Anum when the war started in 1914. And they were both in the same transport to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And we don't know about the transport, and there are no more papers. And we don't know about the circumstances of dying. But from Maria Darmstädter, I could follow her path till Drancy. In Drancy, this is near Paris, there was the last deportation to Auschwitz-Birkenau. But before, she was in another camp in Gurs, Pyrenean, southern France. And from there, she could send letters to Switzerland by the Red Cross. And also from a little other spot where she was for a certain time also under political control. And I found a passage there, and I want to quote this, where she found, in a way, the only healing element anymore is the foundation stone meditation. This was a time when Maria Darmstädter was outside the camp of Gurs, in a time when the camp Gurs was empty. They were all deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau, but she had a temporary stay on another place and sent everyday letters to the inmates there, and she got no more answers. And she realized they are all away. And she will follow them soon, but then she lost her inner security, because she was, during the whole camp days and weeks and months, she was a helper of the other ones. So there are many wonderful testimonies about her time in this camp where she served the other ones. She was an advisor, and she was so happy that she could give something. She said, now I know why I studied all the time anthroposophy, because now is a time where we can give something out of what we have lent. She never regarded anthroposophy as a possession, but something as a kind of a gift. We were able to participate, and then she said, now I have something to give for consolidation, for advice. But then, at the end, she realized now she can't go on anymore. It is extremely difficult, she's writing in the letter, to go on living like this from day to day, knowing that they are all deported to an extreme way of death probably, and how to keep yourself upright, knowing that the police will come in some days or weeks and get her as well. And the experiences of fear and compassion, willingness and flight into nothing, but the desire to extinguish, they have long surpassed anything imagined. She was such a trained individuality in praying, in meditation, such a good scholar. But then she's getting weak. And she was also ill with the heart, and the heart rhythm was out of control. Everything is shaken, and we retreat from the present and from the future and almost from the past. Nothing retains brilliance, meaning, and form. Nothing of the inner being you have built up has grown. She didn't know about the gas chamber in detail, but in a way, I think she was aware also of forms of death which are no more human death forms. Something terrible in a way. And then she said, nothing can stand. She was so anxious, so breathless, and really the heart rhythm totally lost control. And in a letter she said she is nearly forgetting that God has put his name in every soul. She, I mean, such a religious, spiritual person. And the turning point she describes in a letter. One would therefore have nothing else to do but breathe out and in danger. This only remaining rhythm gives the answer to everything. Practice spiritual contemplation in the balance of the soul, where the searching world becoming deeds unite your own eye with the eye of the world, and you will truly feel the soul working in men, for the will of Christ reigns in the world rhythm in a soul-gracing way. Spirits of light, let the east fire that which is formed by the west. This speaks in the Christ become life, death. What happiness in the same letter to be able to rest in the refuge of such wisdom, breathing, seeing, receiving certainty of soul. It struck me in a way the foundation stone meditation, or one of the verses concerning the rhythmical system, in an extremist situation of being a refugee, losing also physical stability, and suddenly the call. And for me, it became also an awakening moment when I studied this 15 years ago, that sometimes we have the tendency to see the foundation stone meditation in our positive, lightful, warm, wonderful gatherings. But there is the other side present. So for me, it was an enormous inner image to think that she was in the deportation, then later on with the trains, and carrying this image of human being, even in a situation where it's all destroyed. It was Elie Wiesel, one of the survivors of Auschwitz. He was a boy there with his father, who said that there in Auschwitz, not only 1.5 million people were killed, but the image of man. This is an expression of Elie Wiesel. The image of man was killed. Maybe Steiner would have said this is not true, because the image of man was killed in the 19th century from a spiritual point of view. And this was a kind of a consequence. What happened before in the culmination of materialism, which Steiner said happened in the late 40s of the 19th century. And the philosopher, as Heidegger said, it was the darkest century of mankind ever, the 19th, which is surprising, because in comparison to what happened in the 20th, but from a kind of a spiritual point of view, this darkness of materialism, where the image of man is not only overshadowed, but really destroyed. And Michael saw this. So in the leading thought, Steiner is describing how Michael's concern about if the Michael age is coming too late to change the situation, because these rapid forces of destruction in deforming the image of man, and then the practical consequences of the 20th century. And unfortunately, we are still partly in our societies and world developments still have the feeling that the 19th century is not healed. Nationalism, racism, but also the understanding that a human being is mainly a physical body, which should be optimized, which can be optimized technologically, or which can be selected. The society can decide which human beings should be born and not born, or which old people should better die and go, and we call it assisted and so on. But it is a question of selection. But the selection is not a spiritual one, it is towards the physical body. And this is the 19th century. These are the illusions and the utopias of the 19th century, and also the illusions and utopias of medicine. Medicine as one of the disciplines who have the right to select, and they judge. So it was Hufeland, the doctor of Goethe and Schiller, who said, if a medical doctor dares to judge life worth to be lived or not, then he's becoming the most dangerous man in society. So this is not at all, he said, a challenge of doctors to judge which life is worth to be lived. And if we start with this, we'll end in, this is in 1806, it was formulated by Hufeland in Weimar, no, in Berlin, but this came in an extreme way. So in such a century, Steiner brought this. And this is also a real serious background of the Waldorf school. I mean, if we talk about Waldorf school, we talk, of course, about our positive developments and the life in the schools, and that we'll really, it's a holistic approach to what is a human being, and all these wonderful things we are developed in the school. But for me, it was in a way also awakening when I was studying Steiner's teacher conferences, and at the end of the first school year of the Stuttgart schools, that means in summer 1920, he said in one of the conferences that it's not wrong to say that the brain thinks, because it's becoming right. Being stuck in materialism not only produces people who think badly about the physical, mental, and spiritual, but also produces materially thinking and materially feeling people. That means that materialism causes man to become an automaton of thought, that man becomes a being that thinks, feels, and will as a physical being. And it is not merely the task of anthroposophy to replace a false worldview with a correct one. That is a theoretical demand. The essence of anthroposophy today consists in striving not only for a different idea, but for a deed, to tear the spiritual soul out of the physical bodily, to lift man upon the sphere of the spiritual soul, so that he is not an automaton of thought, feeling, and sensation. So he said the over-incarnation of the human soul, or this being drawn in the physical body, and this has a lot to do with the society and with the technological surrounding, and that it all became physical at the end, that he said materialism is become true. It is not a false, it's not anymore a false interpretation, it's becoming true, that the brain thinks and not a human soul, and that more or less our so-called feelings are then more or less emotions, and they have a physical base, and also what drives us, die Triebe, they are physically imbued. These are not free motivations. It is more or less what we have to do. So Steiner said in this faculty meeting, humanity today is in danger of losing the soul spiritual. We live in a time when people are in danger of losing their soul through the materialistic impulse. This is a serious matter. This is a fact that we have to face. And he said that, but if the Waldorf School impulse will be successful, there is a chance to change this development. So it's not only a better education for those who can afford, but it's really an impulse in saving human souls. So the school impulse and the School for Spiritual Science impulse, they are close together. And I think we all see the need for this. We all see that this emptiness of life, this devoid of life, instead of spiritual content, it is so necessary for our time to bring it. But it starts in the foundation stone meditation with this call for self-knowledge and with this new relationship. And in the middle is the soul, not the spirit. Menschenseele. It's directed to the soul. This was also an interesting discussion in the Christmas conference 100 years ago when they discussed the statutes. And Dr. Steiner was formulated that the society, the Anthroposophical Society, is committed to the care of the soul life of the members and so on. And one member said, but why soul? He wanted to have spirit there. And it's not soul life. And it's interesting that human soul is the main focus in the center of the meditation. And it's really a kind of a center of our existence on earth, I would say. I mean, human soul is really enabling our biography on earth. The soul is the substance which connects us with time and space. The soul is the substance which mediates between past, present, and future, between pre-natal existence in the unborn sphere and life after death. It's interesting that this soul dimension is so centered. The School for Spiritual Science, but founded or based on a new respect for human soul. Human soul, you live within the limbs which bear you through the world of space into the spirit's ocean being. Practice spirit recalling in depth of soul, wherein the wielding world creator being, your own eye comes into being in the eye of God, and you will truly live in the human world all being. We saw it before in Eurythmy, the first part. It's so interesting. It starts with the limbs. And we think also in childhood, in a way, even if the heads are so big of the newborns, and more or less a quarter of the whole size. Later on in adult time, it is only an eighth element of the whole size. But the limbs are a very dominant element. The limbs and the child discovering the world of space, approaching the world and the other one, and in a way transcending itself, which is always a mystery of the will, also from a physiological point of view, that we if we are active in our will organization, we transcend our own body. In the book The Miracle of the Soul von Seelenrätsel, Steiner is saying about the will process within the organism. Only a metabolic process can be attributed to volition, to the will. But the event triggered by this process is at the same time a being-like event within the balance and power relations of the outer world. And then he went on, and the soul, by volitionally, willingly activating itself, transcends the realm of the organism and lives the events of the outer world within its actions. That means if we are really part, and it also if you play tennis or football, or we have to be within the other situation and within the laws outside. If we don't understand how this ball is coming, we will never touch it correctly. So the organism knows, or the willing human soul knows about the outside. You live within the limbs which bear you through the world of space into the spirit's ocean being. There are a lot of interpretation, what is the spirit's ocean being, but partly the world beyond our skin is a spiritual world in reality. The true being of the world is spiritual. And also that we have the will ability to move means that we know about these laws and forces. But of course, another element of this verse is also that we are always with our will dimension transcend our biography. It's so interesting that we all have to go, have to leave once our body completely. Not only if we are active in the will sphere, where we always are a little bit more than our body. We are living with the other one, to the other one, intentionally. We are not in ourselves. We are in, but at the end of the biography, we are completely out of the body. It's the end of our steps here on earth. This is the moment where we really go. Until then, there are our life paths and our destiny. But then it is really this going beyond. And Steiner once said in a lecture, it is the willpower who enables us to die. Even if we feel as if we are very old and weak, we don't feel a lot of willpower. But Steiner said this is only the conscious will. The unconscious will is the one who makes then this starting, this going procedure, because the will wants to act further. And it's clear that in this body, in this biography, it's done. And the will is always much bigger than what we achieved. So our biography till the end will be a fragment of what we wanted to do here, wanted to become, wanted to achieve. It is always unfulfilled life. And this is an essential characteristic of the will, that it has to be unfulfilled. It is never complete. Only death can be completed. Es ist vollbracht, but that means death. Or when Christ Jesus overcame it, 3 days. But the spiritual mission of Christ was not completed. This went into resurrection and then Pentecost, but also our own biography. This is an enormous call. What is a human will? It is in single phrases, but there is enormous content. And also the call of spirit remembering in the depth of the soul. I said metaphysical anchoring the eye, that the eye, the human eye, is living in God's eye. It is an enormous statement that if we really go into the depth of our soul, we realize that this will to exist, this will to be here, this will to be born, to be incarnate, no, more than incarnate, the will to exist as an individuality has to do with the relationship to the Creator love and to the Creator foundation power. As deeper as we realize ourselves in the will, we find a new homeland in God. But not with eliminating our individual I, but in our belonging to. So probably there would be no more suicide if all human beings would have the capacity by a deeper meditation in the will sphere to find the point where the human I is in the eye of God, connected or at home. Every human I. And the body or the biography can be handicapped, or the status of the elderly can be very difficult, but the I is at home in the eye of God. And to remember this means also to find your origin as a human being, a new, true life. And this is an enormous call for the 20th century, that every individual can experience itself as God-given. That means restore its own dignity, uniqueness, and is also its own contribution to the world. We are all here because we have a kind of mission, a task, which is deep down grounded in our will. Therefore we came. It would be so good if this experience can be awakened in human souls. And we can absolutely understand that this is, I think, a foundation meditation for such a high school impulse, such a kind of an impulse for a becoming world. And of course, we are not talking about an egoistic will, but a true will, which is always serving tasks in the world. And there it's also said we are in a sphere of love, in a creator sphere of love in ourselves. And maybe just to remember that it was on Maundy Thursday that Christ washed the feet of the disciples, nothing more, only the feet in the Last Supper. And in St. John's Gospel it is stated that Christ said, whoever is washed needs only to have his feet washed. It makes his whole being clean. And the other meditations start in cleaning the feet, but from the inside, building up the dimension of the what is human will. So an antidote to this influences with, in the sense of to make it as a material will, to free the dimension of will, and also to reconnect it to the human dignity. And this means also our physical body that is ours, not stolen and robbed by others. And that our soul forces has the right about the physical body. So will and limbs, our own limbs, our will. Some words to the second part, human soul. You live within the beat of the heart and lungs, which lead you through the rhythm of time into the feeling of your own soul being. Practice spirit sensing in the balance of soul, where the surging world becoming deeds unite your own eye with the eye of the world, and you will truly feel in human souls creating. We are now in the realm of feeling world relations, and also self-feeling. One of the mysteries of the rhythmical middle organization of the human being is this interpenetration of life and death. So in a way, if we want to become active in the outer world by will, we have to destroy first and to reconstruct second. Also physically, if we want to be active physically, there is a flame in our metabolic system which has a destroying capacity, but then it comes a kind of a reconstruction. Or if we want to build a new house for the Waldorf education, we will destroy the meadow. We will destroy the green. And this is a kind of an archetypal signature of all building up processes, that they undergo destruction first and building second. But in the middle organism, it's a little bit interpenetrated. Life becomes death and reverse. So they are really interwoven. This is a mystery of heart and lung, but also of our soul life, which is always between sympathy and antipathy, construction and destruction, life and death, life and light and darkness, love and hate. It is, and the call is to make a break, to stop. A little bit the balance of soul, how to achieve it. In the will call, there is a certain call of look back. So in the evening, or maybe also during the day, look and realize what you have done. Also not in a bad way only, also sometimes we achieve something good. But in the balance of soul, in the middle aspect, we have to make a little break in balancing and overcoming the level of sympathy and antipathy. In a way, Steiner said, in how to obtain the insights in spiritual world, the feelings or sympathy and antipathy, they should become organ of perception. We realize somebody or something is sympathetic to us, but this could awake us for a situation, for something. It is an organ of cognition. We can just live sympathy or antipathy, or they become organs of word perception. It's very interesting to handle the feelings and not just to do and live and express them. And then we have there a wonderful organ in the middle of human existence of a new connection to the world. In self-recognition and world recognition, and in a breathing atmosphere, unite your own eye with the eye of the world. Also in the course of the year, the soul calendar, of course, but also the destiny of time. It is so difficult to be witnessing what is going on in our time. Who of us can pretend to say, I'm really witnessing, I'm really breathing in what is going on in the world, understand it? Who is really, as Steiner said, experiencing the destiny of time? Maria Darmstädter, I mentioned her when she was in Gurs in the first camp. She wrote in a letter, it is a great community across the earth. It is called suffering and strength. She had the feeling that she was in the right place. It sounds strange because all the inmates tried to leave the prison, the camp, and all the relatives wanted that their relative is coming out. But she said, I will stay here because this is now part of the human destiny. And I will be in touch with the other inmates and with all the other camps like this. I mean, she was completely against camps, but she wanted to participate also in suffering. If suffering is there, I can't exclude. So it is a great community across the earth. It is called Suffering and Strength, inner resistance. So unite your own eye with the eye of the world. This is much more than this, but it has a certain relation. And if we think of a school for spiritual science and of people who want to become active in one of these faculties, as we said, wherever we work in education or agriculture, I think in the world dimension we need this reconnecting with our targets, with our will, as we said, but we need also a real connection to the world in the middle, in the center of our human being. If not, we act out of the will, even if we have good targets, moral intuitions, but we need a relationship with the world of becoming to find out what is needed in a situation, needs an awareness of what is going on, how to unite with the world of becoming. There is a necessity of commitment. It has to do with a true feeling. Also, especially if I want to do something in the world, from human world being to human soul working. Third, human soul. You live within the resting head, which from the grounds of eternity, the world thoughts open up to you. Practice spirit beholding in stillness of thought, where the gods' eternal aims bestow the light of cosmic being on your own eye to free and active willing, and you will truly think in human spirit depth. A school for spiritual science which wants to develop the world thoughts, not producing them. Who can say that we are the producers of world thoughts, but a schooling path for active perception. Really the intentions of the gods, in a way, what is in creation meant to be and meant to become. The realization of the idea in reality is the true communion of man. Thinking has the same significance toward ideas as the eye has towards light, the ear towards sound. It is the organ of perception. Steiner published when he was 24 years old, but it remains valid for him. The true communion of man is the realization of the idea in reality. So the world thoughts acting in the creation, how do we communicate with them? We need to, let's say a doctor who wants to assist a patient, in a way he should be in connection to the world thoughts acting in diseases and in healing. It can't be our own will and concept. We have to participate in ongoing processes meant to be or meant to be restored. Or let's say, which is maybe a little bit more easier to understand, organic farming. How do we foster and support life in agriculture in the sense of evolution, in the sense of organic life, instead of only optimizing our outcome of industrial farming? So what is in the sense of the earth, and how do we participate in this? So in the limb, we were in the realm of the space. In this feeling reality, we are in the realm of time. And now we are partly in the realm of eternity, belonging to the cosmos, the resting head above. Heaven comes to earth. Very interesting. It is an awakening process from the limbs to the heads. It starts in the limb and in the foot, and then is going up to the head, toward the spirit and to the goals of God, world being light, intentions of creation. It sounds maybe too big, but Viktor Frankl, most of you will know, he said, what is the sense of the world? This is that we, in every single situation, find out what we have to do. The meaning of a situation for us. There can be no standard rule. The state says, or government says, or administration says, but we have to find out what we have to do. It's a call to us. Every challenging situation is a call to the individuality to find out what you have to do. And this is really meant also in the foundation stone meditation, that the awakening on this level means I have to find out what has to be done by me, by my own. And maybe something completely new and unconventional. The future is beginning sometimes out of nothing. We have to imprint our intuitions in the world. It can be the onset, something really new. And if you realize these processes in will and feeling and in thinking, the cosmos is responding. This is in the second part of the macrocosmic part of the three parts of the meditation. The cosmos is really responding. We realize that what we now experience in our soul forces has to do with macrocosmic, enormous processes. Maybe we have not the time anymore, or not more the energy anymore, to go in all these verses now from a Christological, macrocosmic aspect, where we can really see how these powers are acting in our will, in our middle organism, and in our head organism. But I hope that it became a little bit more sensitive. In what sense this foundation stone meditation is really also a foundation for a school for spiritual science with all its faculties, and that we are really on the way to development, to develop these future forces, these resistance forces, these forces of self-recovery in a time of identity loss. So in a way, it is really a meditation for our time. It is so difficult to communicate to the public, and even if it is the only meditation Steiner published, apart from the calendar of the soul. So this foundation stone meditation was then published, at least in das Wochenschrift Das Goetheanum, but it was published, what Steiner usually did not do. The calendar of the soul, probably you know that it was at the end part of the tobacco parcels of Emil Molt going to the soldiers in the war. Also a very striking picture that they got the cigarettes in the First World War in Galician or in French, and they found a meditation option to reconnect with the I in the course of time. A recall in the sense also, yes, that is me as a human being, as a being of the spiritual world. So a self-recognition of what is a human being, but the same importance, the recognition of this in the other person. You are a human being. In that sense, what is kindled in us, Dr. Steiner said, by the insights of anthroposophical spiritual science, which aim at the supersensible, is love of humanity, which teaches us human worth, which makes us feel human dignity. So this is the direction of anthroposophy, a new love of humanity, a new understanding of human worth, every single human being worth, and to feel human dignity. It is not at all our task to understand and recapitulate all what is said in the collected works, but to transform our relationship to other human beings. And this is the base of a new school, a Michaelic institution on earth, founded there. Instead of enhancement of human beings, instead of manipulative optimization of cognitive performance, mental states, and physical activities, we all know this, manipulating drugs, instead of perfection of the human being by a kind of medical technical system, instead of alienating the powers of the soul and consecrating the body of the human being to opposing powers. Instead of all of this, it is a very strong impulse to rebuild the image of man and find out who you are and where and will become. And I think it's clear then that it is so modern to place this in this beginning of the 20th century, this courage in knowing, this zeal for knowing also, and this creative potential of knowing, this spiritual fire. And it's given by Dr. Steiner in full awareness, as I mentioned, for the needs of the earth, for the values of the earth. And it has been given also in accordance to spirit on earth. Yeah, and I will end with, again, what we heard and saw, but without interpretation by my own, without further introduction. I will end then with the first part. Willem Simon said it is, the end is as a prayer. From an esoteric point of view, I had many years ago the feeling that as intensive the first three parts are connected to what Steiner called the Christian Rosenkreuz stream, this has to do with the other master, by the inner quality as well, and by the absolute reconnection to what happened in concreteness at the turning point of time. But there are many different approaches to it. Wonderful that also in the fourth part, the last part, is the we. And this is an element of the School for Spiritual Science, that we together, not one is enough, at least two, and in the midst is the Christ. This is the smallest element. And this was the basis of all section, was in a way Dr. Steiner's co-working with the section leader, and in between two of them, there could be incarnated a Christ impulse. So it is very important that Steiner wanted to have in the middle of the section a small working community, and then groups around. So he and Ita Wegman, or he and Mary Steiner working, and then a first group joining And it's so interesting, he said once to the young doctors, you know, the Goethe Annum can't work in the world only by you. That means this inner center can go out because there is the group which brings it to the world. So it's also powerful, but also without any power. All dependent on human beings, all dependent on communities. And this is one of the wonderful miracles of Dr. Steiner, that he never acted willingly. He could have done so many things on earth with his power, but he did not. He was only a teacher. And teaching means giving contents or perspective for your free will and not acting. And it must have been very difficult for Dr. Steiner in several situations not to act, but just to enable people to do. And I was always very touched when he was then so grateful when it was taken up. So Laurie Smith's draft eurythmy, and when they did the first performance, at the end she wanted to thank Dr. Steiner for the gift of eurythmy, and he took both hands of her and said, no, I thank you. So he could really bring this Michaelic wisdom, but it was dependent on human beings. May human beings hear it, and not only hear it, but internalize it and then represent it. That means making it active in the world and taking the full responsibility for it. That means a high school impulse. I am responsible for what I am doing. So he opened it to these communities and was so grateful if human beings came. So he was just a teacher, and in this wonderful, noble Christian element of being the servant of the other ones, washing the feet, but also being maybe also then at the end kind of a sacrifice, because if they don't do what is needed, if they don't protect the Goethe Annum, then it's destroyed. So it's also a kind of dependency on the society and the community if they work in the right way. The foundation stone meditation for me is a promise for the future. None of us can maybe say, I am a human being in the sense of the foundation stone meditation. That's me. If we really go through the verses, meditative, we realize the distance between our own thinking, feeling, and willing and what is described here. But in one esoteric lesson, Dr. Steiner said, in doing esoteric exercises, man grows spiritually into the future. He experiences within himself what will once be in the future, and what he thus experiences in what we know as the higher worlds. They represent future states of humanity. So wonderful that we bring into the presence something which is an element of the future. We never have the full picture, but insofar as we have these intentions, we have the direction to grow in that sense. So we end this reflection or approach with the fourth part. At a turning point of time, the spirit light of the world entered the earthly stream of beings. Night darkness had ceased to reign. Day radiant light shone forth in human souls. Light that give warmth to poor shepherd's heart. Light that enlightens the wise heads of kings. Light divine, Christ's Son, warm our hearts, enlightens our heads, that good may become what from our hearts We are founding what from our heads we direct with focused will. Thank you.